CIOs or CTOs are actually fully prepared, for everything to do with data governance and the security complexities that are going to start arising out of this?
I don't think that companies are adequately prepared as a rule. And I think technology actually is the answer. I do need to know where my chatbot is sending information. There is a big risk from a security perspective that artificial intelligence presents us what's called a side channel attack. I can't get data from the system, but if I engage with the chatbot, envision a world where the future is more principle-based access controls. You could literally just type in natural language in. The artificial intelligence would understand your data catalog.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we are joined by Mike Hamilton, Chief Information Officer at Cloudflare. Mike has led IT and enterprise engineering at high-growth, high-stakes companies like Databricks, Cruise, and Salesforce, with a clear focus on building strong teams, tight business alignment, and systems that scale without breaking. In this episode, Mike shares what CIOs should do when AI pressure hits, how to think about data governance and security, and why training plus experimentation is the real leadership move right now. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of TechDogs Discover Dialogues. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Very excited to be here.
Great. All right. So, Mike, you've had a fascinating career and through some of the most innovative tech companies in the world, I mean, you were with Salesforce, you were at MuleSoft, you were at Databricks, now you're at Cloudflare. What was that journey like? I want to kind of start that journey. I mean, I actually want to start this conversation by setting the stage for the listeners with your personal path, how it shaped you, and what have you learned out of it?
If you go back really far enough, when I was 12, I took a computer camp where I learned to program in Apple Basic. And to paint the right picture, computers were not pervasive back then. Like my entire elementary school had one computer. And so they weren't everywhere. And so I learned to program and I loved it. But when I was going to college, I was like, gosh, everybody's going to go into computers. It's pretty obvious this is going to be a thing. So I'll go into biology. I'll go into biology. There's some things I can do with biology, and maybe I'll become a doctor or something like that. And so I get out of my bachelor's degree, and everybody that wants to hire me wants to hire me for my computer skills. I get out of college, I'm like, wait, you guys haven't solved this like technology and business problem? Like I thought you would have solved this by now, and without realizing that, like, oh my gosh, infusing technology into business is actually really hard. Especially when you rewind to the 80s and 90s, and then you start getting into the 2000s. And so it's been a wild journey. And I started my career in help desk in public sector. And then I moved into engineering and architecture and things like that. But the public sector journey was really interesting because I would characterize it as we always had money for stuff, but not people. And so I had this endless opportunity to work with big servers and big network switches and big routers and things like that, because we could buy those and we were running our own like metropolitan area network and everything. So I had this opportunity to have incredible amounts of experience. I had to learn everything. I introduced Linux into public sector, because there was a good opportunity to do that. Like budget cuts happened, like during the .com boom, like public sector budgets were cut because tax revenue was down. And so we had to find ways to do things without any funding. And so Linux was a natural fit there. But I think like in terms of the theme of that era of my career that's important, it's this notion of being able to explore. That it's on me as a technical person to satisfy my own curiosity and to be able to answer questions in technologically significant ways. So like, back in those days, I used to go to this website that would point me to open source technologies, and then I would dig into open source technologies and install them and try them, right? I'd run little experiments over and over and over again to figure out what was going to fit in my organization, what wasn't. I would go home and solve problems the same way, having a lab at my house and things like that. Again, it's about this freedom to explore. And I think that's really important because when public sector and hypergrowth are very different concepts. A public sector organization will be around for 100 years, and it doesn't matter as much. Your impact isn't going to like affect it one way or the other. Like you can make it more effective, but it will still be there even if it's not that effective. Like that's sort of the nature of public sector. Yeah, hypergrowth. It was cool to get into hypergrowth because there's no commonality there. Hypergrowth is like we have to do everything, but only the things that are most important. Like you're simultaneously like we have nothing, so we're going to build everything, but we have to build only things we need. And MuleSoft was in particular the really key jumping off point. Before MuleSoft, though, just again to kind of paint a picture, I had started with this company. My first tech company was a disaster recovery as a service company, and I was employee number 15. And it satisfied my curiosity greatly to wear like 4 hats. Going to a company where I was the head of client services. I started actually as a solutions architect. I became the head of client services very quickly, and wearing 4 or 5 hats, it's like, wow, this is unlimited amount of work. But also an unlimited amount of opportunity to understand how a business works and everything. And so that kind of fed my passion and my drive to understand the whole business. And then the MuleSoft world, I got brought into a company that had no IT department. So I was the first IT hire. MuleSoft was 300 people. The company was worth like 650 million. And it ended up being this incredible opportunity that launched my career where I'm going now.
And what do you think is that common thread that connected these experiences across such diverse organizations?
I would say curiosity is the thread and drive, really. Both of those things. So I grew up really poor, and that's where the drive and the grit comes from. the drive and the grit comes from. I was characterized to my close friends that like if you've ever been poor, you always feel like you could be poor again. You never forget what it felt like to be poor. And you always feel like you're one step away from being poor, even if you're not. It's just a mindset that comes with that. And the grit and the determination that came from growing up in poverty had that huge impact on me. But then I had it was coupled with an insatiable curiosity, this idea that like, I want to know as much as I can about anything tech related. I'm like this in my personal life too. Like I roast coffee, for example, and I'm really nerdy like this. All right. I also make sourdough. Like I dig into, like I go deep on things. I figure out like I'm going to understand this. I'm interested in it. Let's take that spark and then let's go deep and understand how far I want to go with this thing. Technology has been kind of the same, but it's fortuitous that worked out really well for hypergrowth companies. Because hypergrowth is a different world. Like you can't wait to be given approval in hypergrowth companies. You have to be able to execute without approval. You have to have high confidence you're going the right way. And I fervently believe that the way to have high confidence is to have done a lot of experiments, done a lot of really quick trials to make sure we're going the right way. I mean, to have a bunch of people that wake up in the morning and they're motivated by the same sort of world. It's like, I expect the sand to be shifting. I expect the world to be constantly changing. And that's normal to me. I equate it to surfing, right? Like at no point in surfing do you go like, I'm going to follow this line and it's going to go straight this way. Like surfing is a dynamic sport. It's always changing. That's like the tech industry in a nutshell, really. Like we're always surfing. Absolutely. Ambiguity is life.
True. What I'm taking away from this is that I think every chapter, maybe if it was the public sector, it was the hyper growth companies, I think it kind of really layered, the way you lead today, and I think it starts, like you said, the first is the growth mindset, the second is the curiosity, and the the beginnings that you came from, and keeping that in mind, I think. But one thing that I want to take away from all of that is what's happening in the tech landscape is no different, right? There is so much curiosity today. I think cloud, edge, and now AI are all converging. And CIOs specifically, and CTOs for that matter as well, are standing right at those crossroads. So I want to talk about those, or that in specific, right? How do you think IT leadership is evolving at scale? And, what are the new challenges and opportunities you're seeing emerging for CIOs today?
Yeah, I don't think you can even have a coffee anymore without mentioning AI. I just don't think.
I completely agree.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter the context, mind you. I could have coffee with somebody that doesn't work in tech at all, and the topic will come up. One of my good friends is an attorney, and he and I probably talk about AI more than I talk with my professional friends about AI because he's so curious, and we do little experiments that we kind of feed off of each other. I don't think you can avoid that, but if we take a look at like the churn that's being created by this, so I find AI to be fascinating, but it's also creating a lot of churn. There's massive potential, there's massive hype going along with it, and that creates a lot of pressure. So the first thing that I want to call out is from a CIO perspective, remember that your business partners are feeling the pressure too. Right? It's really, really important to understand that if you're not a technical person, you know that if you don't do something with AI, it could be the reason why you're not successful. Like everybody feels this pressure, but then the executing on the pressure is hard. And it reminds me actually of an earlier part of my career. I want you to imagine, I have to paint a little picture here, but I rolled out email to a company. They had never seen email before. Now, for those, email did replace a manual process, believe it or not. The manual process was the mailroom. And if you wanted to send a message to everybody in the company, you would make photocopies of it, and then you would go to the mailroom and you would put it in everybody's box. That was the process it replaced. It's easy to forget that because it was quite a long time ago, and it was ripe for replacement. Surprisingly, though, that's very disruptive to people's mindset. Like because I also had to use a computer. Well, people didn't have computers at home either back then. But like coming to work was like the only place I have a computer is at work. So the familiarity with the technology was really, really low. People are coming in. This seems totally foreign. It's disrupting everything they're doing. And hand-holding the business through education of like, hey, this is how we work now. We're changing the way we work. That's something that I did earlier in my career. And AI is exactly the same, but in a much broader way. And unfortunately, also a much more ambiguous way. Because I would say I was talking to a VC friend of mine recently, and he said, like, I'm not sure if this is the first inning of the game or if the players are still taking the field. And I was like, I think the players are still taking the field. Like, it's impressive. The magic of ChatGPT makes it feel really, really mature, and it does have some impact. But I think when we look back 10 years from now, when we look at where we were today, we're going to have a very different opinion of how mature the technology is today. And as such, it's that ambiguity that makes people uncomfortable. So think about your business partners again as a CIO. How do we do this with my business partners? And by the way, like the best answer I can give anybody is encourage experimentation, and don't forget, training is vital. So I want you to think also about this now. So I trained a whole generation of people that had never touched a computer before on how to use a computer for their day-to-day job.
Yeah.
Then eventually people coming out of school or just life in general, they'd already touched a computer. Computers were pervasive. They were ubiquitous. They were everywhere. No longer was this baseline skill set necessary. Because the churn of this AI technology and the disruption of this AI technology is so powerful, from an impact perspective, that's going to happen faster. So people are going to come out of college. Your next round of hiring young people is going to be people who are already expecting to see the tools there. They're going to naturally use AI and expect AI to be part of their day-to-day workflow. And so we're going to see this sort of pressure that starts to form in organizations around people who expect the technology to be there and able to do something, and the governance frameworks that companies want to see to feel safe about it. So keeping in mind that with all these new companies that are coming out right now, the concept of like, where's my data at any given point in this transaction has to be at the top of our mind as CIOs. We're like, yeah, there's lots of experimentation. This is great, but it's company data. What are you doing with it? Where's it going? Who's touching it? What can they see when they have it? Like, these are all vital questions we have to ask. And so, as an example, I think a lot of AI companies are used to this idea of, I want to do a POC first. When I want to try, like most of the companies I engage with that are AI companies, they want to do a POC first. They know that, they expect that. That's, in other words, we're not at this point of selling where it's just like, how much can I put you down for? It's more like, can I try it first and see if this is trained and like is going to have the impact I expect it to have? So we're in a very different space right now, but I also think it's kind of exciting. And then you've got this notion of like edge computing and hybrid cloud and things like that. And I have lots of opinions there, but I think like that's more of the technical back end of how organizations evolve to keep their tech stack future proof. So I want to pause for a second in case you have something you want to dig into.
No, absolutely. In fact, I do have. You talked about data as one of the points. I think, do you think any of these organizations or CIOs or CTOs are actually fully prepared, for everything to do with data governance and the security complexities that are going to start arising out of this?
I don't think that companies are adequately prepared as a rule. And I think technology actually is the answer. Cloudflare certainly has an opinion on that. Like we are working on AI security technologies that help companies have visibility into what's happening. There's an ecosystem of tools, in fact, in the world right now that are starting to focus on this idea that like I do need to know where my chatbot is sending information, or, where my AI information is going, and being able to screen it out and even redact it. So there is a big risk from a security perspective that artificial intelligence presents us what's called a side channel attack, which is that I can't get data from the system by going directly to the system, but if I engage with the chatbot, I can get data that way because I can ask them questions and essentially always trick the chatbot into giving me something I don't have access to
Right.
necessarily. And so there's an overlay that has to be applied in terms of like, hey, would Mike be able to see this data if he were logged into the system I'm going to get it from? And CPU, the technology, is helping us sort of frame that better and make sure that like I'm not getting data I couldn't see otherwise. But when you open up your company's data lake or your data warehouse to artificial intelligence, you need the same sort of data controls. And again, I envision a world where the future is more principle-based access controls instead of rule-based access controls. So you think about like the days of the evolution of firewalls started with this thing called packet filtering firewalls, and it was a terrible era of computing because you had to write one rule for everything you wanted to do, and it was brutal and it was impossible to troubleshoot. And the advance in firewalls was stateful packet inspection, where it's like I'm going to assume based on the state of a packet, if it was a conversation initiated inside, that like the response coming from the outside is automatically allowed. Therefore, I don't have to create a bunch of crazy rules. I would call that sort of a principle-based approach to security. If the traffic originated on the inside and it's allowed, then let the response come back. Artificial intelligence is going to need something similar, and it should lead to a role-based access control that's similar, that's principle-based. So that you could say something like, you could literally just type in natural language, the head of HR should be able to see people data and let that be the principle. And then the artificial intelligence would understand your data catalog and say like, okay, I can find all the places where they should be able to see it. So when they're engaging with artificial intelligence, they're automatically allowed these rules. As we see more applications developed with artificial intelligence as the backend, I saw this technology recently that was an ERP that's going to probably compete with NetSuite first, and everybody in the room that was with me was like, man, if you're NetSuite, you're probably a little bit scared right now, even though NetSuite's a part of Oracle. But looking at how artificial intelligence will evolve in products that are launching to disrupt existing players is going to be really interesting. And I think the advantage is going to be less rule-based, more principle-based. So that's very exciting, but it's emerging and it's not there yet.
Got it. And how do you think technology leaders should prepare their businesses or teams for the shift that's coming?
Well, I think in a big way, the first thing is like we had talked earlier briefly about like multi-cloud strategies and in edge computing when we were preparing for this, and I think that there has to be a big focus on not accruing more tech debt. So as the pace of disruption increases, the tech debt also increases. Doing nothing, for example, creates tech debt. Like I've been quoted today, in fact, I've been quoted multiple times because one of my favorite things to say is that today's innovation is tomorrow's tech debt. Like the thing that you're betting big on today is like tomorrow's tech debt, because eventually you have to unwind whatever architecture you deployed to take advantage of new things. Now we're at an interesting precipice in terms of technological advancement, because if you had like a standalone application in the past, you now have this need. You could say like, okay, we moved this to Amazon or Google from a hyperscaler perspective, but it's still running in containers or something. Like maybe you went from virtual machines to containers, but you haven't gone to microservices. And if you're paying attention at all in the industry, you should be knowing that serverless is where everything needs to go. From an architecture perspective, it allows you to serve people at the edge as close to where they are as possible, as fast as possible. Re-architecting your systems that are customer facing in particular, or that need scale for edge computing and serverless, is a microservices approach. Rebuild microservices at the edge, rebuild microservices in a multi-cloud strategy so that your availability and business continuity is sort of automatically built into that. I think CIOs you still have to focus on your bread and butter. How do we scale? How do we keep tech debt for vital business services minimal over the future? Now, in terms of build versus buy on artificial intelligence, though, because I think this is really where the conversation has to be for any CIO. While it's great to run a lot of experiments, the reality is that like there is some degree of artificial intelligence that needs to be in-home grown. And it is the part of your business that relies on the technology for competitive differentiation. Like zooming out for a second on what does that actually mean? When I say like you should focus on artificial intelligence for competitive differentiation, let's just take the concept of accuracy versus how fast to market you're going to get. Okay, so right now in the space of artificial intelligence, you can type something into an LLM and go like, wow, look at this answer, but you end up fact check. The more detailed of an answer you need, and the more accurate of an answer you need, the more fact checking you have to do.
Correct.
Right? You need a way to validate this thing. If you're building an artificial intelligence-based technology for your own business, it's likely that it's something that needs to be high accuracy. Like this has to be 99% accurate or 98% accurate or 99.999% accurate. And therefore, like the context has to reduce. So a principle that I would offer to all technologists out there is that if accuracy requirements are broad, then the context can be broad, but his accuracy requirements are high, then the context has to be narrow. Like the way you get higher accuracy is with more narrow context. And so encouraging businesses like, hey, experiment to do the basic productivity things, but like invest in disrupting yourself. Can you disrupt yourself with artificial intelligence? Can you disrupt internal processes with artificial intelligence? Because that's where the dollars would really need to go. Now zooming out again a little bit though, don't underestimate how much training your workforce needs. Like we're exploring a lot of Cloudflare right now. We're giving everybody Gemini training. We're giving everybody artificial intelligence training because we want to assume that the need will surface from the folks doing the work.
You talked about this one specific thing, which was, how can you use AI to disrupt, your USPs but on one hand, don't you think that everybody out there is essentially saying that I'm going to be leveraging AI as well?
So like remember in the days of SaaS, right? Like when I give Mark Benioff, in fact, the most credit in the world for convincing C-level leaders that the cloud was safe. Okay, like just going back to that, like he gets the crown for that one, like that, because I remember working in companies back then, and like this notion of cloud hosted anything was like, oh God, can we do this? And him convincing that the industry that was a huge deal. When I was in SaaS though, like you think about like, okay, what's the startup cost to disrupt somebody today? Now, if you think about the pre-SaaS world, it's like, oh my gosh, to disrupt somebody, I have to go buy a bunch of servers. I got to rack them. I got to run my own ERP. I got to run all my own applications, etc. With the SaaS world, it was like, I don't really have to do that. All I need is a credit card in like 10 minutes, and I can disrupt you because I can get my financials online. I can get my e-commerce online. Like I can get everything online in a matter of an hour. Like, and I can start disrupting you. Artificial intelligence is promising to be even more disruptive. And one of the measurements that you can cite on this is the time to 100 million from a revenue perspective. So artificial intelligence companies, for normal tech SaaS companies, the time to 100 million was between like 8 to 15 years typically. Your first term of revenue would take you 8 to 15 years. And your team would grow from hundreds to 1,000 or more. In the artificial intelligence world, we're seeing companies hitting 100 million in revenue with 30 people, which is scary because in my mind as a CIO, I'm like, that's a lot of debt. Like this company has a lot of things that they're not doing right now. But from a disruption perspective, it's how every company needs to look at it. It takes even less for a competitor that does not exist today to compete with you tomorrow. Therefore, the question you have to ask yourself as a company is, if I were to do this, if I were to go out and disrupt myself, I'm mad. I'm just going to go start another company that does exactly the same thing that we do now, but I'm going to start with artificial intelligence. That's where you got to be. You got to think about like, how would I disrupt myself? I remember sitting in this room with our CTO at MuleSoft. In fact, this is back in like 2013 or so. And he had this mandatory Friday meeting for his architects and his directs. And it was about like how, if we were starting a competitor to MuleSoft today, how are we disrupt ourselves? And Kubernetes was one of the topics that came up. And so we started on the Kubernetes journey back before there was still like it wasn't guaranteed Kubernetes was going to be the way to go. But we're like, you know what? If you were going to try to compete with us tomorrow, you would start here. And artificial intelligence is the same. So I want business leaders to ask themselves, like, if somebody was going to go compete with you today, what unfair advantages could they develop by using something artificial intelligence related? And there are professionals that you may need to hire off of, out of the market to like help you with this, but still the question you can answer without that kind of technical help.
And do you think there is, a risk side to this? Because at one point, we talked about the fact that all of the workforce needs to be skilled on AI because that's going to be the requirement of the future, right? On the other hand, there's the whole customer experience side to it. Okay, and I'm just trying to understand, if businesses are going to try and disrupt themselves, at the same time, ride on this wave, or surf on this AI wave, the risk factor to the employee and to the customer is going to be something of concern.
Yeah, I would say like the first thing I would want to call it is that this idea that we're going to somehow lay off 90% of the workforce worldwide is something we need to stop talking about. Like if it's because it's not helpful right now. So when people are in a fear mindset, they don't operate creatively. It's very hard for people to be creative when they're in a fear mindset. And so if the framing of artificial intelligence for a typical employee is I need to learn this or I will lose my job, it's the wrong framing. The framing should be, how can I do less of the work I hate and more of the work I love by leveraging artificial intelligence? That's the right way to frame this. Putting fear around it is a terrible idea. In terms of risks that businesses are going to take on, there's a few. One of them is that, and I can give you an example from my own team. We were developing an internal tool for artificial intelligence, and we had done a bunch of work on it, and then MCP launches. And as we looked at MCP, we're like, oh man, like we have to actually throw away a bunch of work we did because we were trying to find a way around this sort of problem that MCP came in to solve for us, but we had to start over in some ways. Like we lost some ground. But keep in mind, though, losing ground is okay because the knowledge is there. Like you're deeply connected, you understand the problem space better. So like I think the risk is like be prepared to throw some work away. That's going to happen. It's almost impossible. Then calling out a more serious risk, and one that I actually lose a little bit of sleep over, is the concept of vibe coding from a security perspective. I'm very nervous of this. The people saying like I could vibe code that in a weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm 100% convinced that artificial intelligence does not write secure code, and the industry supports my being convinced on this. Vibe code has tons of security holes in it. The artificial intelligence does not have enough context, and professional developers aren't going anywhere for the foreseeable future. Professional for a reason. They are engineers for a reason. Like they do have knowledge, they do have the ability to scale things, but like the context again is the important part. The human understands the context better than artificial intelligence will for the foreseeable future, and like we can't throw that work away. But I would be really reticent to say I'm going to launch an entire company by vibe coding a platform myself. It's like I think you're going to get owned.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, we've had some interesting opinions on vibe coding. I think it was Stephen Walters from GitLab who talked about this, but he talked about in the larger context of using AI for coding. And he said for every, I think, 1,000 lines of code that was introduced using AI, there were so many or multiple vulnerabilities that showed up during code testing. And, everybody who talks about building enterprise scale software or solutions cannot go with a vibe coding mindset whatsoever. It's great to kind of, just build on a concept, to just see it, on how it would probably function, is a good start for vibe coding, but I don't think it is ready yet for enterprise level.
Rapid prototyping is good. It allows you to show, like, it's an easier way to show what your intent would be or how it might work. But from a security perspective, it gives me a lot of pause because it's just not. It's probably not going to be there for a long time, and we shouldn't have that much confidence in vibe coding as a strategy.
So, Mike, up until this point, we've kind of spoken about AI. We've touched upon a little bit of multi-cloud. We've touched about a little bit of vibe coding and the risks. We've talked about how businesses ought to look at AI, implementations at their organizations. What I'm very interested in knowing now is that, and we touched upon briefly of it in terms of how you guys are approaching that Cloudflare. It's the skilling part of it, right? Because it's the people who make it or break it. And from what I know of you, you have always emphasized that there is the human side to the tech, to the leadership. And I want to dive into that next. So how do you build a culture where teams feel safe to experiment, especially when the stakes are high? And you gave us an example of something that you guys were working on, in terms of an AI tool internally, but then there was somebody who already did it. How do you make teams feel safe to experiment?
Yeah, it's if I were to give you kind of a metaphor for it, imagine that I had to move all the rocks for Stonehenge like 2 inches at a time, and I eventually had to create Stonehenge. In hypergrowth in particular, the execution strategy has to be to move everything in small time increments. Like because you don't always have, like you don't have time to have everything be a massive project. It has to be like, we can do this in 2 days. We can do this in 3 days. So like move the needle as much as you can, wherever you can, to try to give this, the progress that you need over a longer period of time, as opposed to trying to say, we're going to get really far and we're going to plan the whole journey. The metaphor that I use in my team is, imagine that you were planning a trip and you said, like, look, we're in California and the road trip we're going to plan is to go east. And so you plan it, and somebody says, like, we got to get to Boston. And so we plan all the hotels and the highways and the gas stations we're going to stop at, or charging stations or whatever. And we get all the way to Boston and somebody goes like, oh, you know what, dude, it wasn't Boston, it was Austin. Right? That long-term planning actually doesn't work that often. And in almost a 30-year tech career, I can tell you that like long-term planning can be risky. It's not that it doesn't work at all. It's just that you can't expect it to work without checkpoints along the way. Like key checkpoints, look up, take your bearings, make sure that we're getting what we need, and then going back down. All right. So I've said a lot of things in terms of like the mindset of dealing with a lot of cases in the same time, but let's talk for a second about unlocking people. At the baseline of my philosophy is that my job as the leader is to unlock people's potential. So think about that as a goal for a leader. If you're a leader and like your goal is to unlock the potential of your team, that's a very different way of thinking about the people that work for you. First of all, I need people to work for me when they get up in the morning that they're highly motivated. Like one of my best bosses back, he said, like, Mike, I hire people on three criteria: qualifications, motivation, and interpersonal skills. He's like, qualifications I can fix. If somebody doesn't know something, I can send them to training. I can get them that. Like qualifications are easy. Motivation, though, if I have to call you to get you out of bed in the morning, like, not going to work. Like, you need to show up, want to have an impact. You have to want to make a difference. And then interpersonal skills, in IT especially, interpersonal skills are vital. To sort of recharacterize his joke, he's like, there's no don't be a jerk training. Like, you don't send somebody interpersonal skills to like don't be a jerk training. It's really, really hard to develop people. And so I look at my team as like, look, I'm going to hire people that I can help unlock. I can help them unlock. And now, how does that translate into day to day, for example? So I'll tell you a story around one of my directs years ago. I hired this guy, spend months looking for this guy. I finally find the right person. I hire him on board. And I'm so excited for the stakeholder to work with him. The stakeholder catches me in the hallway and she goes, that guy sucks. And I'm like, what happened? And so I had the next meeting with him and her. I'm like, okay, like, let's see what's going on. And he just doesn't know how to deal with a VP is really the thing. Like, he's brilliant, but I'm watching this VP roll him constantly. Like, she's asking repeated questions. She's going super deep really fast, and he's not managing her at all. He looks like he's always on his heels. So I hire a communications coach for executive presence purpose. I'm like, hey, look, going to work with this guy. And within 3 weeks, she's like, this guy's awesome. I love him. The only thing was like giving him strategies for how to talk to executives. Executives need more succinct answers. You need to kind of predict what's going on. You need to manage the flow of questions so that you can make the point that you make, right? And I think that this is a key investment. Like, everybody has some strengths and some weaknesses. So I believe in this approach called strengths-based development. I'm going to hire off people who want to I'm going to give them a bunch of work that they're going to kill it at. I know they're going to kill it at it. Then as I get to know them, I'm going to learn what they're weaker in. And I'm going to give them one thing to focus on that they need to develop. And I'm going to give them the resources to help them develop it. Now, think about this from a retention perspective. Because there's this book called The Peter Principle that drives me kind of crazy. The whole hypothesis of the Peter Principle is that people have some kind of an asymptote. And in the Peter Principle, that asymptote is defined as a position, the highest position you can handle before you're now useless and you basically hit your max. Think about how expensive that assumption is if it only cost me 25 grand, let's say, to develop somebody to fix that skill. Like, so I have somebody who's awesome in every other category, but they have one weakness. And it only cost me 25 grand to fix that weakness. That's less than a recruiting fee to go get somebody else.
Right. Absolutely.
It's worth it. But it requires leaders to think broadly in terms of like, my network can't just be my other CIO buddies and my other CLO buddies or my VP buddies or whatever. It has to also be, who are my speaking coaches? Who are my executive coaches? What kind of development I encourage somebody to get to help them overcome their weaknesses? Because people actually want that kind of truth. But it's sometimes a really hard conversation to have with folks the book Radical Candor actually does help. It sounds so tech bro hypey, but it's really not. Like, Radical Candor is a great way. It means I care a lot about you and I'm willing to challenge you directly. So challenging you directly means like, hey, you know what? the thought behind the presentation was great. The presentation itself not so great. So like, let's talk about that, right? Let's get, but then if you're there to support them as a leader, let me get you the help you need. And if I were encouraging anybody who's exploring leadership that's interested in what I'm saying to do one thing, is that don't assume you're the one that can help somebody. You're not necessarily like, am I a good public speaker? Sure. I like public speaking. I'm good at it. Can I teach someone to public speak? Probably not. I don't think I can. Like, I really need someone else to help me. And so don't take that burden on yourself. When your staff needs development, when they need growth, get them the growth, but don't expect to provide it yourself. You don't scale that well, and you can't teach everything. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. But CIOs and technology leaders for the most part of it are considered very tech first mindset. And we talk about how, you mentioned like you should be looking at the strengths of the employees, probably allow them to be coached by people who know what needs to be done, and not necessarily be you. But a lot of technology leaders are tech first, and then there is the human side to the leadership when you're managing and leading people. So what is that piece of advice you would give people who want to be tech leaders?
I think to relay from my own experience, I get out of bed in the morning wondering how technology can help people. I'm going back to a job I had in college. I worked for a bank. It took a typical employee that did this at a bank 30 minutes to generate one form letter for a customer. And therefore, the time window for compliance with this letter was like 30 days, because someone had to make the letter and then proofread. Somebody else had to proofread the letter. Is that right? And when I found out about this problem, I was like, have you guys ever heard of mail merge? And they're like, huh? So I got their files and I took the disk home and I like built a mail merge for them so they could do this without that. And it reduced the time by like, it's seriously 95%, right? Like all of a sudden they can do this easily over and over and over again. And the checking was much simpler. When I wake up in the morning, I think that's a really simple example, but like think about how Kubernetes changed things or how virtualization changed things. Like I led virtualization through that. Wake in the morning going like, man, if I can move workloads around and the server never had to go down, like this would be huge. It is about bringing our passion for technology, but remembering that I'm relying on my passion for technology to infuse better technology decisions into the organization. So I think about it this way. Somebody who goes to school to become a finance expert, like they're going to be a future CFO. That's their domain expertise. And in a business, they know a whole lot of things I don't know. But I can combine my strengths with their strengths if I help them see how technology can help them. And that requires a very honest conversation. So from my perspective, the interpersonal domain of IT is the most important part. Like we can say like, I'm tech focused, I'm all about technology. You got to be about the people, and it has to be the people in the business. Like it's the people in the business that need the attention. It's the people that will get the work done. I remember a company that I joined, this person who onboarded me, she goes like, Mike, let me explain something to you. There are 20% of the people in this company do 80% of the work. So your job in your success path is finding those 20%, because that's how everything will get done. Turns out she was right. The network that I built, the 20%ers, was my strongest asset in the company, because I knew how to get things done. So if my boss brought me something, it's like, I can use this person. Like if I work with these people, I already know who to assemble to accomplish this. And it's like, well, gosh, she's really fast at getting things done. It's like that little bit of advice gave me a lot. But notice that it was the interpersonal dimension, not the technology. The technology was a given. It has to be there. That's how we're solving the problem. But to know how to solve the problem and what problems are most urgent, I had to have the interpersonal work. Like I got to be connected. I got to have conversations with people. So
just for conversation's sakes, Mike, if I was to take a contrarian point of view, and you've done this for 30 years, right? Do you think that the expectation today is that every technology leader needs to be more human-centered than ever before?
I think it's always been the need. It was just never the outcome. There was this Dilbert years ago where it was like, it had these 4 pictures of different professionals. And the last guy was, had a beard and flip flops and a t-shirt, like a tie-dye t-shirt. And his caption was, I'm the only one that understands the computer system, worship me. That was like the caption for this guy. And this is probably from like the 80s or 90s. Okay. And the problem with like the den of trolls sort of mindset is like, if the mindset of your internal business customer is, oh man, I have to go work with IT now. Oh, like your brand is bad. and it means they're not going to seek opportunities to work with you. The one of the best teams I ever had, we had this like central area where we would have charging cables and gum, and other various things that people would like to have, and we encourage people to just come be around us, and that increased the familiarity. And I'm always telling my team that, like, if we're great at everything else in the business, but our ticketing is terrible, and like the general customer service of how we help people every day is bad, they won't trust us for other things, because they'll be like, oh, and I got to take them this thing. I don't really want to talk to them. IT leaders have to create a world where people want to talk to you because you've made an impact on their life in some way. You've made their world better. You heard them. You brought the right solution to the table. I don't know if it was ever a case that wasn't the requirement, but it wasn't. From a supply and demand perspective, there was no supply. Like, historically, there wasn't a supply of technologists that cared about the human side of it. And when I think about because at one point in my career, I worked on the platform side of a SaaS platform. And so I was on the engineering side, network architecture, that sort of stuff. And I would describe my landscape as skinny, but really deep. I was probably in like the top 5% of people in the world that knew about this particular technology. And I enjoyed that to a degree, but I didn't really need to have people skills to do that. Like, I didn't really have to maintain a lot of relationships because I just needed to be really good at what I was doing. And I missed the IT world because, again, I wake up in the morning and I think like, well, that person looks frustrated. Why are they frustrated? Like, why did they get here at 7 a.m. and leave at like 7 p.m? What is it about their day that's inefficient that I could help with, that they could focus more on the work that they have? And this actually really came into play at MuleSoft in a big way, because we focused our attention on, like, we had this turnover in accounts payable, in fact, in that particular company. And so we're like, rather than trying to look at this as an HR problem, let's look at this as a technology problem for a second. You're like, what is it about the AP job that's terrible? And so my team sort of swarmed this for a while, and we got rid of a bunch of dead processes that like shouldn't have existed. We did help them digitize this. And then the retention on that team was much higher after that. Nice. So the indicator was like, obviously this job is terrible. Obviously people don't like shoveling all day long. Like, can we get rid of the shoveling and give them more interesting work to do? That was our approach. And I think there's infinite demand long-term for this, because the field will just keep changing. But I don't think we've nailed it so far. In a 30-year career, I would say I'm disappointed the technology hasn't nailed more of the opportunities that we probably could have, because the velocity. But by the way, like, we get a little bit of a free pass. The velocity of change in technology has been insane.
So, all right. So, Mike, this has been a masterclass on leadership and tech. We're almost shy of time. So before we wrap, I want our listeners to hear the Mike beyond the CEO role. So we'd love to do something fun, the rapid fire round. That our audiences love. Short questions, instinctive answers, ready when you are.
All right, let's go.
Okay. First concert you ever attended?
Def Leppard.
Oh, nice. A city that you would move just for the lifestyle?
Manhattan, for sure. Like, that'd be a lot of fun.
Okay. One food you could eat every day and never get bored?
Probably Thai food. It's like my absolute favorite. It's between Chai and Chinese, so any Asian cuisine almost.
Yeah. A gadget you love that's not work related?
I have these glasses called X-Real, and they allow me to have screen on my face. So like when I'm on flights, if I'm working on my laptop, I don't have to crook my neck down to see my screen. And if I want to watch a movie, it's like having a big screen. It feels a little weird because they look like sunglasses. So you're on a plane, and it's like, why is the guy wearing sunglasses on a plane? But I'm like watching a movie with my head, looking forward. That's my favorite gadget that I have. I look for excuses to use it.
Oh, no, absolutely. I got myself the Raven Metas a couple of months back, but because we don't find the ones you have in India yet. But I have looked at some of the videos and I thought it was very fascinating. I did a lot of VR content before, I joined this company. So I have a different understanding. I mean, I've used the HoloLens. I've used even the dev versions of Oculus up until, the last one that they came out. So I love the whole VR space, and it's fantastic when you're, in that space doing things. All right, but let's move on. One book or podcast that you would recommend?
My favorite book is A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. It's what the entire premise of the book is that knowledge is free. We have a knowledge counter all over the place, but insight is what we're actually after. Like, what hard questions can we ask ourselves that lead us to progress?
If you could instantly learn any new skill, what would it be?
I think at this point, I would love to be able to speak any language I wanted to. Again, if there was a way, and I know with like the live translation stuff, that's kind of here, but
Yeah, it's almost there now.
yeah, it's because I think when you like, I like to travel. When you embed yourself in someone else's country for a little bit, and you taste their food, and you see their art, and you hear their music and things like that, it tells you a much broader story about who people are and what's special about them. But the problem with language translation is the cultural significance of words and meaning are lost, and so that it can have that I would want it would be like to understand and speak any language to understand the true meaning instead of just like the translated meaning.
Absolutely. I was trying to do this at ChatGPT the other day. I was trying to give it a phrase that's very much, a regional language, and I wanted to translate it to some other. It just couldn't, you just can't, it just couldn't express it. I said, it's okay. Okay. A morning ritual you swear by.
I roast coffee, and then I like to make my coffee in the morning. I use French press, and I have to do that every day. It's like 200 degrees water temperature. The grind is specific on the coffee, and like that has to be correct for me to feel good about my day.
The last TV show you binged on.
We've been binging The Office recently. I had like dropped off originally when you used to watch shows when they were on television. I dropped mine around speed 6 or so, and then my kids got into it, so I picked that up and binged that, which was pretty funny. I also been Silicon Valley recently, and I'm continually blown away by the crazy accuracy of that show.
Yeah, no, it is fantastic. I've actually watched it myself. I think Office is. I mean, if you get past the first season, it picks up after that. I think Silicon Valley just picked up right from the start. And it's some of the things. Yeah, it did, and they got it bang on.
And with some very hard concepts, like it's a show that does a good job of explaining things that are complicated about like, when their valuation, like said, they run into somebody and that company's valuation is too high. And like, well, as a layperson, you'd be like, why is that a problem? But then they explain in the show why it's a problem. Like, wow, that was so cool. Because I don't think I understood it that well, and then when I watched the show, I understood it better. So I really enjoyed Silicon Valley.
No, I think if you're a technology professional, I think that's one show that you could relate to a lot.
Totally.
I think back in the day, they had something which at least I saw in the UK. It was the IT Crowd.
Oh yeah, IT Crowd was a great show.
Yeah, that was a good one as well. Back when they were just introducing computers to the entire world, and they'd come up with that show. But
perspective, like there's not that many episodes, but it's very high quality and really funny, and it's internationally funny as well. I do really love that show.
Great. All right. So, Mike, that brings us pretty much to the end of the show today. Thank you so much for joining us on Discover Dialogues. I think you are a fantastic guest. I think you are very candid. We talked about scaling tech. We talked about AI. We talked about everything. And also at the end, got to know you more as a leader that leads with empathy, tries to understand his people a lot more and then build on them. Gives them that benefit of doubt. And I think that's what is important, and that's what the world needs more. So thank you so much for joining us. Any parting words?
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be here. And I love the conversation. I love the exposure. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're listening to this and you want to talk.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.